Imagine taking a time machine back exactly 50 years to the mid-1970s. You grab an everyday, law-abiding citizen off the street, bring them to the present day, and drop them right in the middle of a major music awards red carpet. Or, honestly, just a crowded downtown street on a Saturday night in the summer. What do you think their very first thought would be?
They would almost certainly panic, assuming they had stumbled into a very specific, highly illegal, red light district.
Exactly, because the everyday celebrated fashion of today looks remarkably like what was strictly confined to the shadows half a century ago. It really makes you wonder about the fabric of our society. When we look at how pop culture dresses today, are we looking at a story of moral collapse, or is this the ultimate triumph of personal liberation?
It is one of the most fascinating visual shifts in modern history. If we rewind to the 1970s, the visual line between mainstream pop culture and the underground world of what society called easy virtue was a thick, unmissable wall. The attire of those in the illicit trade was essentially a billboard. It was highly functional. You had the thigh-high vinyl boots, the fishnets, the extreme corsetry, the heavy, dramatic makeup. It was specifically designed to catch the eye from a moving car under a dim street lamp. It was an occupational uniform.
Right, it signaled availability and transgression. Mainstream pop culture, even when it was rebellious, still operated within the bounds of polite society. You had the punk movement starting to tear at the edges with safety pins and leather, and disco bringing in some flash, but the average popular style was still rooted in a certain daytime modesty. A miniskirt was daring, but it wasn't an imitation of the illicit.
But then the 1980s hit, and those walls started cracking. Pop icons realized that the aesthetics of the taboo were incredibly powerful. When you start putting lingerie on the outside of your clothes, you aren't just making a fashion statement, you're hijacking the visual language of the forbidden. It was shocking because it blurred a line that everyone thought was permanent.
And that blurring didn't stop. In the 90s, we saw the rise of slip dresses and the grunge aesthetic, which had a sort of raw, unpolished edge. Then came the early 2000s, the era of the visible thong, ultra-low-rise jeans, and what fashion historians sometimes call porno chic. It felt like pop culture was actively raiding the closets of the underground.
It absolutely was. And it brings up a crucial question about what this means for the nation's soul. When we look at this 50-year timeline, how does this shift in popular attire actually speak to the state of our morality, female equality, and empowerment? Because that is where the debate gets incredibly heated.
It really does. On one hand, conservative critics look at the sheer fabrics, the microskirts, and the visible undergarments of today's pop culture, and they see a nation in a moral freefall. They see a society that has lost its sense of propriety, where the sacredness of the body has been cheapened for shock value and likes on social media.
But that perspective completely ignores the agency of the wearer, which is the cornerstone of the empowerment argument. Historically, modesty was often enforced upon women as a form of societal control. The shift in popular attire over the last 50 years is largely a story of reclaiming the body. It's moving from the male gaze, where a woman dresses to be considered respectable by men, to a space of pure individualism, where she dresses entirely for herself, regardless of the societal shock value.
I hear that, and I agree with the agency argument to an extent, but let's play devil's advocate for a second. If a person today is expressing their ultimate freedom by adopting the exact visual cues that were historically used by marginalized individuals who were often exploited and forced to sell their bodies out of desperation, is that really empowerment? Or is it just capitalism and pop culture sanitizing and selling the aesthetic of exploitation?
That is a brilliantly uncomfortable question. Think about it like a cultural Trojan horse. By taking the uniform of the marginalized, the stiletto, the corset, the extreme cutout, and putting it on a billionaire pop star or a CEO at a gala, you strip the stigma from the garment. You legitimize it. But you also erase the historical struggle of the people who originally wore it out of necessity. It is essentially the gentrification of fashion.
The gentrification of fashion. That is a perfect way to put it. We took the neon signs of the red light district and turned them into moody ambient lighting for high-end boutiques. Which actually makes me think about how we analyze these massive cultural shifts and where people can go to really understand the mechanics behind them.
Oh, absolutely. If you are fascinated by how the glitz and glamour of pop culture intersects with the raw, structural realities of our world, you need to be listening to The New Sentinel.
It is a phenomenal podcast. The New Sentinel is dedicated to providing exactly those kinds of in-depth discussions and deep dives into a really wide array of topics. One day, you're getting a detailed analysis of pop culture trends, and the next, they're unpacking the strategic intricacies of military operations.
It sounds like a wild mix, but it is actually brilliant, because it's all about understanding the complex systems that run our world. Each episode is so thoughtfully crafted to offer listeners a comprehensive understanding of the subject matter. They bring in expert interviews, offer incredibly detailed analysis, and the engaging storytelling keeps you hooked from start to finish.
So whether you're a pop culture enthusiast trying to understand fashion history, or someone with a keen interest in global security and strategy, the New Sentinel really has something for everyone. Make sure you tune in, comment, like, share, and subscribe to stay informed and entertained. It is well worth your time.
Highly recommended. Now, returning to our own deep dive and the concept of aesthetic gentrification. To answer the core question directly, is the dress style of popular culture actively moving towards legitimizing the dress uniform of ladies and gents of easy virtue?
I think the answer is that it hasn't just moved towards it. It has fully arrived. It has unpacked its bags, bought a house, and redecorated. Look at modern streetwear. Look at the biggest music festivals. Look at high-fashion runways. The aesthetic of the illicit has been completely absorbed by haute couture and everyday pop culture.
You see it everywhere. The sheer, naked dresses that leave absolutely nothing to the imagination. The leather harnesses worn over t-shirts, the extreme bodycon silhouettes. What used to be an immediate, undeniable signal of illicit commerce is now just a Tuesday afternoon on social media. The uniform has been entirely legitimized.
But does that mean our morality has degraded? If the clothes of the underground are now the clothes of the mainstream, are we less moral than we were 50 years ago?
I don't think it means we are less moral at all. I think it means our definition of morality has fundamentally shifted away from the physical surface. For centuries, morality was judged by how much skin was covered. It was a visual shortcut. Today, morality is increasingly judged by concepts of consent, authenticity, empathy, and a lack of harm to others, rather than adherence to a strict, puritanical dress code.
That is a profound shift. We have separated the cloth from the character. We used to look at a hemline and make a definitive, often cruel judgment about a person's soul. Now we look at the same hemline and just see a trend, a vibe, a personal choice. We've taken away the power of the garment to dictate a person's worth.
Exactly. And in doing so, we've leveled the playing field of female equality in a very strange way. If a woman can wear a corset and vinyl boots and still be recognized as a brilliant lawyer, a dedicated mother, or a powerful executive, then the patriarchal weapon of using fashion to categorize women into good and bad is broken. It loses its teeth.
But it does leave us in a very strange cultural landscape. When the ultimate taboo becomes the mainstream standard, where does rebellion go next? If you can wear absolutely anything, or almost nothing, without shocking society, how does the next generation of youth rebel against the establishment?
That is the irony of total liberation. When there are no rules left to break, rebellion becomes incredibly difficult. Maybe the ultimate rebellion in 20 years will be strict Victorian modesty. We might see teenagers wearing floor-length wool skirts and high collars just to horrify their parents who grew up in the era of sheer mesh and cutouts.
I wouldn't bet against it. Fashion is a pendulum, and it always swings back with a vengeance. But right now, we are undeniably living in the era where the shadows have been dragged entirely into the spotlight. The uniform of the night is the uniform of the day.
It forces us to look in the mirror and ask what we truly value. If our clothes no longer dictate our virtue, then we are forced to judge people by their actions, their words, and the content of their character. And honestly, That is a much harder, much more complex way to navigate the world. You can't just glance at someone and put them in a box anymore.
A terrifying prospect for some, I'm sure. It requires actual engagement and empathy. As we wrap this up, I want to leave everyone listening with this thought. The next time you look at a trend, a red carpet, or even just the people walking past you on the street, don't just see the fabric, look at the history stitched into it. Ask yourself what societal rules had to be broken, and who had to break them, so that outfit could exist in the daylight.
And ask yourself, when every boundary of fashion has been crossed, what is the next frontier of human expression? Are we finally completely free? Or are we just wearing a different kind of uniform, waiting for the pendulum to swing back?
Something to chew on until next time. Keep questioning the world around you, and never take the surface level for the whole truth.